Anna Scober's 2009 paper entitled Cinema as a Political Movement in Democratic and Totalitarian Societies Since the 1960s highlights the role of cinema spaces and film as a form of media to the politicization process of democratic and totalitarianism. This source refers to the cases in Europe, however, I will be exploring the role of film in political movements from the United States as well as Europe. The Truman Show, The Trial, and Solaris can all be considered rejections of totalitarian ideology and presents the fears of it through dreams. Anna Scober's investigation searches for the links between cinema and politics in both democratic and totalitarian societies, and the action taken having consumed such media. She highlights examples of this such as the Yugoslav delegation's participation in the World Festival of Youth and Students for Peace and Friendship in Vienna, where cinema played a crucial role alongside music, theatre and debates. The Trial. With the rise in technological advancements throughout the 20th century, alongside the rise of authoritarian regimes exploiting the public perception, came the fear of totalitarian dreamworlds. A totalitarian dreamworld is a dystopian society in which a single authoritarian regime holds complete control over people's lives. This oppressive environment jeopardizes personal freedom, crushes individualism, and citizens are subject to constant surveillance and propaganda. This regime runs on fear, manipulation, illusion of reality, ultimately creating a nightmarish reality. The horrors of World War II and the totalitarian agenda of the Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union emphasized a great threat of the potential and power of these states. It was no surprise that people across the globe were petrified of this nightmare coming true, specifically after the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima. Art forms such as painting, poetry, and literature played a crucial role in the rejection of totalitarian ideologies, such as the works of George Orwell. In an academic research paper entitled The Effects of Totalitarianism and Marxism Towards Dystopian Society in George Orwell's Selected Fictions, in Orwell's 1984, Orwell shows the motives of dictatorship through dialogue between O'Brien and Winston during the latter's questioning. The opposite ideals of utopia are created. This is an example of literature that was able to convey a rejection of political or socio-economic ideology. However, film and cinema also played a key role in depicting the hellish nature of these regimes. The Trial, directed by Orson Welles in 1962, stands as a rejection of such regimes, offering a haunting depiction of existential dread and authoritarian control. In this film, Welles explores themes of existential dread and the omnipresent threat of a higher power. Through absurd cinematography, the film creates a dreamlike experience, amplifying the sense of unease and hopelessness felt by its characters. The film portrays an authoritarian figure who ultimately exerts control over the protagonist, Joseph K. This figure, depicted as sluggish and entitled, embodies the literal and metaphorical shackles of totalitarian regimes. The presence of a man shackled and willing to live in subservience underscores the extent of control enforced by this regime. All the characters that Joseph K. seeks help from are ultimately hopeless and helpless towards him, leading to profound feelings of isolation and loneliness for Joseph K. The cinematography of the classic film noir era effectively conveys his isolation and unease to the audience. Through brutalist architecture, labyrinth hallways, children peering through holes in the wall, all serve as metaphors for surveillance, being trapped, and a strict, straight-edge regime. In the scene where Joseph K.'s trial takes place, Joseph K. tries to assert authority in the hearing and is ultimately laughed at, which is a direct reflection of totalitarian regimes laughing at its subjects despite their suffering. It also depicts the failure of the law and corruption of police by authoritarian figures under this regime. Audiences living under a totalitarian regime identified with this feeling. In 1972, audiences living under the Soviet Union were provoked to question their authoritarian regime as they identified with themes like isolation, existential questioning, and the struggle for individuality, which were all present in the film Solaris. Some audiences interpreted Solaris as a direct rejection of the Soviet Union, highlighting its weaknesses that are at the expense of the common person. Although the director denied this, Solaris explored isolation and loneliness by delving into the psychological repercussions of such experiences through the character's location, the spaceship. Protagonist Chris Kelvin's late wife often appears through the planet itself. The manipulation of reality through these projections of the character's deepest fears, guilt, and desires forces them to confront what troubles them the most. The scientists back on Earth are riddled with greed as they want to expand Earth endlessly despite clear limitations, and so they exploit those on the space station in order to research, reflecting the innate greed of those at the top of the totalitarian regime. This highlights the limitations of science and technology. Whilst we all want to expand for the greater good, there are those out there who may strive too much for the sake of personal or financial gain. The academic paper entitled The Truman Show, A Symptom of Our Times or a Curse for an Escape Attempt by Jan Jogodinsky explores the French psychoanalytic theory associated with the work of Jacques Lacan, which refers to the concept of excessive pleasure or enjoyment that goes beyond more than satisfaction or gratification, ultimately leading to negative outcomes. In my opinion, this theory could be adhered to the film Solaris through Chris's love for his late wife Harry. As the projection of Harry is created from Chris's perception of Harry, she is only a projection and a copy of his late wife. She herself cannot deal with this. Chris also struggles with this, as she is not how she really was and is only a projection of how Chris wants to see and remember her. This ultimately ends in her ending her own life, and Chris struggles grappling with the death of her over and over and over again. So this brings up the question of what gives a person their identity. Harry struggles with the idea that she's merely just a copy of Chris's late wife, who she believes he really loved. But she just can't deal with the fact that she is not the real Harry, although she eventually makes peace with this in choosing how she does or doesn't want to exist. She eventually ends her life by choosing that she does not want to exist like this. Do we love people based on how they actually are, or how we choose to perceive them? Do we perceive them in a false light or in a true light? What is the meaning of our identity? In the end, communication between Earth and Solaris ends up being futile. This notion highlights human tendency to want too much, particularly with the scientific and technological advancements of the 20th century. The film then celebrates Earth in its natural beauty through stunning cinematography, highlighting the beauty in Earth as it is and that we need not stray too far from home. In the end, the film shows that Chris chooses to stay on Solaris in a fake reality of his life. He ends up choosing to stay in this false reality, reuniting with the memory of his father. However, it is revealed that this is an island on the planet Solaris, where he can manipulate his own reality and follow through with it. Solaris explores many themes such as isolation, loneliness, memory and identity, the human condition, reality and perception, and the ethics of scientific exploration. All of these themes identified with audiences who also struggled with these issues, particularly those under a totalitarian regime and were suffering because of it. Many audiences felt that Solaris was a direct rejection of the Soviet Union, but again, the director, Andrei Tarkovsky, did deny this. Ultimately, audiences who were living under the condition of the Soviet Union did resonate greatly with this film. Even if not an outright rejection of the Soviet Union, it did, however, spark discussion against the Soviet Union. Therefore, the film Solaris plays a crucial role in the political influence of the 1970s. The Truman Show. Peter Weir's 1995 The Truman Show received critical acclaim in advocacy for its contemplative concept and clever satire, as well as Jim Carrey's performance. The Truman Show questions themes such as the nature of reality and explores the idea of living within a constructed reality and the repercussions of it upon an individual. Truman Burbank lives in a constructed reality named Haven Sea, under constant observation and exploitation for mass entertainment in a postmodern consumerist society. The Truman Show absolutely points fingers at the concept of reality TV and its intrusive and voyeuristic nature. The Truman Show, through use of the Omnicam, symbolises transactional capitalism and displays Truman as a walking advertisement for the corporation to highlight the commodification of identity and power, and even further, the influence of corporate power. Referring back to Jan Jotinski's 2005 paper on The Truman Show, they discuss the prevalence of reality TV in a contemporary society, where narratives are often manipulated at the subject's expense for sake of entertainment purposes. Through shots that display the voyeuristic nature of reality TV, Truman is shown to be watched from every aspect of his life, without his knowing, although suspicion does rise throughout the film. The Truman Show makes use of dreams to convey Truman's subconscious desires and frustrations with his reality. Truman has had vivid dreams that serve as a reflection of his inner turmoil as he begins to unravel in the facade of his catered reality. Jagodzinski's writing delves into the Lacanian concepts that explore how Truman's encounters disrupt his perceived reality. The brilliance of The Truman Show is highlighted as an allegorical critique of capitalist society, but also reality TV. This invites viewer in to confront the obscenities of transactional capitalism through exploration of isolation, human nature, existentialism, and the fight for individuality. In Truman's totalitarian constructed world, he is unable to exercise freedom and free will or escape constant surveillance from the godlike lens of his life. As humans, we seek meaning and purpose in life, and The Truman Show displays the lack of meaning imposed by a capitalist state which does not allow for human nature and only seeks to profit those at the top. As stated by Richard A. Rogers' academic paper, he compares 1984 by George Orwell and Brazil by Terry Gilliam as depictions of totalitarian dream worlds, and it states that the dreams of the protagonist are able to symbolize hope and resistance against the oppression of a totalitarian state. Despite the grim reality, protagonists retain spirit through the ability to dream of something better. So ultimately, as a society, how long can we dream of a better time before totalitarian regimes perhaps take over? What can we do to prevent these movements from washing over individualistic communities and all elements of freedom? Why and how do people fall for these regimes and ultimately become a slave to those at the top of the pyramid scheme?